We're going to talk about one of those people who was happy just working in the background. He was happy just doing his thing. And man, did he do it well. William Thomas Strayhorn, better known as Billy Strayhorn, was actually born in Dayton, Ohio. But his family moved to Pittsburgh when he was a very, very young kid. They moved to the Homewood section. There's 3 sections of the Homewood, north, south, west, I think. And the section he moved to is now bordered on the southwest by Martin Luther King Jr. Boulevard. Sound familiar? We got those in just about every city. It's always close where the black folks live. And another American fixture in black neighborhoods, the Pennsylvania Railroad tracks. So those were the boundaries of his little neighborhood, and still are, Homewood section of Pittsburgh, where he grew up, at least for a time. The family did not have money, means, a good life. The father was a mean alcoholic. And the mother decided that little William was a little bit too, what is the word, sensitive and fragile to be around this angry, drunken father he had. So she sent him down to Hillsborough, North Carolina, which is where she was from, so that he could live safely with her parents, his grandfather and grandmother. And that made a big, big, big difference in his life, because you see, in the house, Grandma had a piano. Mm-hmm. And like in most of those homes, they had a piano. We had a piano in my house too when I was a little kid. And he said, my grandmother's house we did. And she didn't play, but she had it there anyway, just in case someone stopped by who could play. That was your entertainment. Now, when my grandmother wasn't looking, my father would play boogie woogie on the piano. Had bar music, and she didn't like that. She preferred people who would come and play hymns, church songs on the piano. And that was the way it was in Billy's grandmother's house. So he was taught to play little hymns on the piano by his grandmother when he was a very, very small child. And she had a Victoria record player, and he could listen to some of her records. Now, most of those were probably gospel, but I imagine there was 1 or 2 blues and maybe even a little classical in there. And he listened and he practiced where he was allowed to practice in that house. Somewhere as he got a little older and education became more important, the decision was made to move him back to Pittsburgh because the schools were better in Pittsburgh than they were in Hillsborough, North Carolina. So he moved back to Pittsburgh, and he doesn't have much money, and the father's not much help. So little William starts taking odd jobs around the neighborhood, sweeping this, cleaning that, washing this, whatever he can do to make a little money for himself. And he finally saved enough money that he could buy himself his own piano and move it into his bedroom. Mom couldn't help, Daddy wouldn't. So he did it on his own. He went and bought his own. I think there's a song, God Bless the Child Who's Got His Own. So he went and got his own blessing. Worked for it, bought it home. And eventually he was taking lessons from Charlotte Catlin, who was a noted musician, teacher, singer, pianist in that area. Accompanist for traveling musicians and singers and vaudeville artists. And then later, he ended up going to Western House High School. This was a very popular school. Obviously, a lot of blacks went to that school, and a lot of famous musicians. Let's see, who else went there that you might know? Piano players. Oh yeah, Errol Garner went there. Yeah. And then Ahmad Jamal went there. My God. Live at the Persian, if you haven't heard that, you need to go hear it real fast. He went there, and Mary Lou Williams did not go there, but she studied with Charles McVickers, who was a teacher there and a teacher in the neighborhood, and someone that Mary Lou studied with, and guess what? Lil Bitty studied with too. And it's funny how Mary Lou ended up being an arranger and a composer, and so did Little Billy. But Billy's real love at this point in his life is classical music. And he saw himself becoming a classical pianist. Somewhere early on in life, like I think it finally occurred to me at some point too, that being a black classical musician was probably as far-fetched as a purple sun in America at that time, and even in my time, and even today in some quarters. So he had to regroup, and he started looking at popular music and hanging out with friends. And so he started playing little solo piano gigs places and playing a mixture of light classical and popular tunes and whatnot. He even had a little trio with a drummer and a guitar player that played little parties and dances, and also, popular songs, light classical stuff. Not really heavy jazz yet, but you get in there. And somewhere around 1933, let's see, he's about 17, 18 years old, Duke Ellington comes to town, and he sees the Duke, and he's like, woo, and he hears the Duke, and he's like, woo, and next thing you know, he's like, I like this jazz. So pretty soon, he's got a daily radio show. Yeah, it's a little jazz troupe, and he's starting to write arrangements for the hottest big band in Pittsburgh. And he's still 17, 18 years of age. He's doing real well. He's wrote a musical, including the lyrics for a high school musical at his school. He started writing songs. The great immortal Lush Life, which is one of the greatest songs probably ever written, most certainly one of his greatest songs, was written while he was still a teenager. So he was a composer, an arranger, a pianist, and a lyricist before he was out of his teens. In 1938, the great Duke Ellington comes back to Pittsburgh. And this time, an older Billy is there. He's probably 21, 22 maybe. And he goes. But this time, he doesn't just go. He goes there with a purpose. He's going there to meet Duke Ellington and to show him something too. He got something he wants to show him. You see, he'd been listening to Duke's music, and he decided to take some of Duke's songs, and rearrange them his way. So he goes over to Duke and says, hey, I got these songs you play, but I arranged them another way. You want to hear it? And Duke goes, what? You did what? You took my music and you rearrange it, you think you a better arranger than me? Well, I just want you to hear the difference, that's all. So Duke goes, boy, this is okay, fine, let's go. So, what do? You give it the score, you walk over to the piano and you play and you show him the things you have changed, the harmonies, the structures, the voicings, the this, the that, the counter lines, and da-da-da-da-da-da-da. And Duke is so impressed, he calls half his band into the room to listen to this kid playing his music in this unique way. Before the night is over, Duke has made a decision. He said, we're on the road for the next 2 months. But I'll be back in New York on this day. When I get back in New York, I want you to come see me because I think we got something we can do. And that started a collaboration that lasted for almost 3 decades. Now, as Duke explained it, he said, you see, he's my right hand and he's my left hand. And he's all the eyes in the back of my head. My brain waves in his head and his are in mine. In other words, they were perfectly compatible artistic beings. It was said that if Duke started writing a piece over here and showed it to Billy and told him to finish it, when it was finished, the 2 pieces would be virtually identical. They had the same artistic sensibilities. And then here goes this partnership. The Duke Ellington theme, Take the A Train, was written by Billy Strayhorn. And the legend is that it was a piece that Billy Strayhorn had thrown away because it reminded him too much of Fletcher Henderson. Imagine that. Take the A Train almost was thrown out in the trash. That was the level of competence and sophistication and pride in his work that Billy Strayhorn brought to the table. They collaborated on many projects, many songs. Chelsea Bridge, whew, that's one for you. Want to play one? That's one for you. Of course, Lush Life. That was written when we was in high school. We could go on and on and on. A million songs. This collaboration went on forever. There was a time that because of the pressures of, well, who gets credit for this? Sometimes Duke would give Billy the proper credit for his contribution, and sometimes because of advertising and publicity and publicists and all those people who want to handle the business, and not the human part of it, Billy did not get the credit he deserved. And at one point he stepped away from Duke Ellington and did his own thing. And I think he did 5 albums like that on his own. He did a dozen more projects as an arranger and sometimes pianist with other members, including some that were actually playing members of the Duke Ellington Orchestra. But with Duke Ellington, he did over 150 recordings. Now you just go ahead and figure that there's probably 6, 7 pieces on every recording that would tell you how much music Duke and Billy Strayhorn wrote together. So much. Satin Doll is one of those pieces that people give credit to Duke for writing, and most people say it's got Billy Strayhorn's signature all over it. Billy Strayhorn was a very generous man. He was a very small man, very kind, never had any animosity toward anyone. He was a gay man, He was openly gay. Everyone knew it. He didn't hide it. But he was committed to a lot of things. One of those was the civil rights movement. He wanted equal rights for his people. Remember, he wanted to be a classical musician, but ran head first into the color line, and so he himself was scarred from this scourge. One of his best friends was Martin Luther King Jr. And so in 1963, the same year of the March on Washington, he wrote a piece, "King is fit for the Battle of Alabama." Just check that out. King is fit for the battle in Alabama. You talk about Bull Connor, and you talk about George Wallace, and you talk about all that evil that was going on down there in Alabama. And that was recorded by Duke Ellington Orchestra and put a part of our album that's simply called My People. You can find that, 1963, Duke Ellington Orchestra. Billy had cancer, and he fought for many years. But finally, 1967, cancer of the esophagus took this gentle giant away from us. The last song he wrote and presented to Duke Ellington was a song called Blood Count. That's the last one. And that was put on an album that Duke did as a memorial to Billy Strayhorn called, and his mother called him Bill. It is said, and I most certainly can confirm, that perhaps the most touching part of that entire album is the very last tune that's really not supposed to be there. Recording session is over, and Duke is just overcome with emotion. And so what does he do? What every musician does when he's overcome with emotion. He sits down with his instrument and he soothes himself. So he starts playing at the piano alone, Billy Strayhorn's Lotus Blossom. In the background, you can hear musicians whispering and talking and putting their instruments up and closing their cases and everything. But the engineer had the wisdom to keep the tape rolling, keep the microphone hot, and they recorded this very emotional and personal performance in which Duke Ellington is talking to his dearly departed friend. That's something for you to hear. And his mother called him Bill Lotus Blossom. Duke Ellington saying goodbye the way musicians say goodbye. Billy Strayhorn was so generous, so talented, so creative. He worked in the background because he loved what he did. It wasn't about fame and the lights. It was about his craft and his people and this art form. He helped people. Oh, he is a major influence in the careers of many other people, including Lena Horne. He tutored her. He worked on her voice with his classical background and whatnot. He worked on her voice, her syllabication, her vocal tone, all of that. He gave her all sorts of tips to enhance her performance. And even though he was gay, she fell in love with him and wanted to marry him. out of her own mouth, she said that Billy Strayhorn was the love of her life. So this is a man whose heart was so big, who was so generous, who was so loving, that there's this song that says, love conquers all. Well, in Billy Strayhorn's case, love conquered all. And that is why his output was 5 albums for himself, a dozen as arranger, collaborator, musician with other musicians, and over 150 recorded projects with Duke, including liturgical works, 4E Suite, so many big projects. It's just, okay, you know, Duke was the most prolific composer in the history of the United States. Black, white, classical, jazz, whatever, he is the most prolific. That would make Billy Strayhorn the second most prolific composer in American history. Love conquered all in that relationship because they were very different men on the outside. But as Duke said, he was my right hand, he was my left hand. He was all the eyes in the back of my head. My brain waves were in his head and his were in mine. Thank you very much for listening.